The war in Ukraine has entered a dangerous and pivotal phase. Russian President Vladimir Putin is warning the West to stay out of it or risk a direct conflict with a nuclear-armed Russia.
And it's only getting worse, and it could lead to World War III.
But who becomes the next American president could drastically impact how this war plays out.
If Donald Trump were president, Putin would be sitting in Kyiv right now.
Across Europe, there's a lot of fear about potential of a second Trump presidency.
The US election is the most important election in the world this year, and that includes for Europe.
Allies right across the continent rely on the United States to protect them. So what happens if America decides it no longer wants to defend Europe? In some ways, it might seem odd. Why is it that a rich continent like Europe relies on a nation on the other side of the world to defend it? The United States is the single biggest contributor to Ukraine's war effort. 83 billion US dollars. That's 122 billion Australian dollars in military, humanitarian and financial assistance. That dwarfs what any other European nation has provided. And when you look at the military support alone, it's even more striking. The United States has so far outspent the next biggest contributor, Germany, 5-1. It's provided more armoured vehicles, howitzers and rocket launch systems than any other ally. And Ukraine is hoping that American-made F-16 fighter jets will help give it superiority in the skies.
So it's absolutely fundamental. It's a real moot question whether Europe could carry on without US support.
So what is the future of US support for Ukraine? Well, there's one outcome, and that has European nations on edge.
I think Zelensky is maybe the greatest salesman of any politician that's ever lived. Every time he comes to our country, he walks away with $60 billion.
Donald Trump has threatened to cut funding to Ukraine and promised to end the war immediately.
If I were president, and I say this, I will end that war in one day. It'll take 24 hours.
But exactly how he would secure a peace deal that quickly is not clear.
Obviously, that's a ridiculous boast. He can't do that. If he's to be taken at his word, it means that in, January, he'll start talking to Putin.
Do you want Ukraine to win this war?
I want the war to stop.
A peace deal sooner is going to be bad news for Zelensky, because he's not going to get territory back.
And then there's the unusual relationship between Trump and Putin, which sets him apart from Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, for better or worse.
I spoke indirectly and directly with President Putin, who could not have been nicer. I had a very good relationship with him, and yet nobody was tougher on Russia than me. Of course he's smart, but the real problem is that our leaders are dumb.
He's pretty much nasty to everyone in the world at various points. He's never been nasty to Vladimir Putin. It almost seems as if it's some sort of man crush.
In 2018, Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin met face-to-face at the Helsinki summit between the United States and Russia. And when the US president was asked whether he believed his own intelligence agencies or the Russian president over allegations of interference in the 2016 US election, he seemingly took Putin's word.
President Putin, he just said it's not Russia. I will say this, I don't see any reason why it would be.
24 hours later, it was a different story.
The sentence should have been, I don't see any reason why it wouldn't be Russia. Sort of a double negative.
An investigation concluded there was widespread Russian interference in the 2016 US election, but it found no evidence the Trump campaign actually conspired with Putin's government. And while Donald Trump was president, sanctions against Moscow increased. But their relationship has remained unconventional and unpredictable throughout. Vladimir Putin says he backs Kamala Harris for president.
She has such an expressive and infectious laugh. It shows that she's doing well.
He endorsed Kamala. I was very offended by that. I think it was done maybe with a smile. I don't know. Who the hell knows?
So there's a benefit in that Trump and Putin are kind of friendly most of the time. And that actually Trump therefore might have, a bit more of a route in. Flip side, if Trump fundamentally doesn't care about Ukraine, which at this point in time I really don't think he cares that much about Ukraine, he will more likely be like, okay, well, I'll just give up on Ukraine, Putin, you can have it, and here you go, help me out with China instead.
There has been no point in the last 10 years of interaction between Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin where Trump's relationship with both Vladimir Putin has bought him or the United States anything.
Donald Trump says a lot of things. Should we really believe that he would abandon Ukraine within a day of getting into office?
I mean, the previous election that Trump won, there was a confidence that, there were enough experienced officials that, whatever Trump might say or do, the actual effects could be mitigated. But I think this time, Trump has had 4 years as president. He knows what he wants to do, and he knows those sorts of people that hindered him last time. So I think he's looking for more freedom.
And it's not just Ukraine watching on closely. A Donald Trump election victory could have ramifications for the rest of Europe too.
To Europe, I said, folks, NATO's better for you than it is for us. Believe me.
He's threatened to pull the United States out of NATO, the world's biggest military alliance. And that's kept Europe largely at peace since the end of World War II.
Would you leave us if we don't pay our bills? Now, they hated my answer. I said, yeah, I would have to consider it. You got to pay your bills. They hated the answer.
The NATO alliance relies on one principle: collective security. That an attack on one will be considered an attack on all, and the other member states would help defend it.
It's the promise to defend your allies, and it's the belief by your adversaries that you will. Donald Trump or any president of the United States can destroy NATO in an afternoon simply by saying, I'm not going to honor that promise, which Donald Trump has already partially done.
And Donald Trump has gone further, revealing during his first term that he warned allies he would encourage Russia to attack NATO nations who didn't pay up.
Let's say that happened. No, I would not protect you. In fact, I would encourage them to do whatever the hell they want. You got to pay. You got to pay your bills.
Back in 2014, after Russia's illegal annexation of Crimea, NATO members agreed to spend 2% of their GDP on defence. At the time, only 3 nations, the United States, United Kingdom and Greece, were meeting that mark. 8 years on, as Russian forces marched into Ukraine, only 7 countries were on track to meet that 2% target. The war in Ukraine has been a wake-up call for many nations. In 2024, 23 countries were set to meet or exceed those expectations.
Trump stressing that the European members have got to do more is actually a very positive development. Sure, it's good to have the United States alliance, but Europe should be able to defend itself.
So what happens if Kamala Harris wins? So far, she's pledged to continue the Biden legacy.
As president, I will stand strong with Ukraine and our NATO allies.
Harris will also move away a bit from Europe, because I think that's a trend we're broadly seeing, but she's not going to withdraw from NATO. She's not going to do these kind of very big symbolic things that Trump is threatening to do. I don't think Harris would ever do that.
Whoever wins, the war in Ukraine isn't the only focus for the United States. The Israel-Gaza war continues to demand significant American resources. And Russia isn't the only nation challenging America.
The focus is very much shifting towards China, which the United States, rather than Russia, China is for the US the big rival and the big concern. For the United States, Europe is sort of seen as a bit of a drag.
So the question is, what would Europe do if American support begins to wane?
Europe would not really be fully able to defend itself if the United States was simply not present.
Europe's needed its own foreign and security policy for a very long time. And so a silver lining, perhaps, of this challenge will be that actually, if they can make it work, this will be a really good opportunity for them to think more strategically.
I guess I believe that Europe would find the political capacity to do that, and I believe that it would probably have the time, but I think it would be wrenching and a major political crisis for Europe.
And it seems Europe is listening.
Protecting Europe is first and foremost Europe's duty.
America pulling back from Europe in one way or another seems all but inevitable. But Donald Trump and Kamala Harris could determine how quickly and bumpy that transition may be. And for Ukrainians, that decision could dictate what kind of country they call home at the end of the war.